Sometimes the past knocks on your door just when you think you have finally forgotten it. And sometimes it comes in the form of a crumpled piece of paper hidden where no one should ever find it. Karol stands in his workshop in Březová, holding an old note in his hands. His hands are shaking. The words on the paper are simple, but they chill him to the bone. 20 years ago, he was a detective investigating the disappearance of a young woman named Anna. The case remained unsolved. They never managed to find even a trace. Now Karol has found this message between the seats of an old car that someone brought to him for repairs. And suddenly, everything makes sense. This is not a story about coincidence. It is about truth that waited 40 years to surface. Before we return to the story, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touched you, definitely subscribe, because tomorrow I have prepared something extraordinarily special for you. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of the workshop, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Karol wiped his hands on an old rag, the familiar scent of motor oil and metal filling his lungs. This was his world now. A simple world, a world where problems had solutions, where broken things could be fixed, where every question had an answer somewhere in a manual or in 30 years of experience. He had built this life carefully, piece by piece, like assembling an engine. Each day, the same rhythm. Open the shop at 7 in the morning. Make coffee in the small office. Check the appointment book. Wait for customers. It was a good life, a quiet life. Nothing like the life he had before. Karol was 56 years old now, though some days he felt much older. His hair had gone completely grey 5 years ago, and he had stopped fighting it. His hands were strong and scarred from years of working with tools and machinery. He moved with the deliberate slowness of a man who had learned patience the hard way. The workshop sat on the edge of Březová, a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. The building was old, built sometime in the 1950s, with thick brick walls and a corrugated metal roof that drummed pleasantly when it rained. Karol had bought it 12 years ago, when he left the police force. Back then it had been abandoned for years, full of rusted equipment and broken dreams. He had rebuilt it himself, spending every weekend for 2 years bringing it back to life. Now it was home. More home than his actual house sometimes. The walls were lined with tools hung on pegboards. Red metal toolboxes stood against one wall. A hydraulic lift occupied the center of the main bay. In the corner sat an old wooden desk covered with invoices, parts catalogues, and coffee stains. Above the desk hung a calendar from a parts supplier, still showing last month. Karol kept meaning to change it, but never remembered. The office was a small room separated from the main workshop by a glass window. Inside were a filing cabinet, a small refrigerator, a coffee maker that had seen better days, and 2 chairs that did not match. On the wall hung a business license and various certifications. Nothing else. No photographs, no personal items. Karol kept his past locked away where it belonged. He had been a detective once. A good one, too, according to his superiors. He had worked for the regional police department for 18 years, starting as a patrol officer right out of school and working his way up through dedication and an eye for detail that others found almost obsessive. He loved the work, loved the puzzles, loved finding patterns where others saw only chaos, loved bringing justice to people who deserved it. He was the kind of detective who could not let things go, who would lie awake at night thinking about cases, who would follow leads on his own time, who would drive his wife crazy talking through theories over dinner. That was before Anna. Her name was Anna Dvorakova. She was 23 years old when she disappeared on a warm summer evening in 2005. She had been a teacher at the local elementary school. Everyone in Březova knew her. She was the kind of person who remembered everyone's name, who always had a smile, who volunteered at the community center on weekends. She had her whole life ahead of her. She went out for dinner with friends on a Friday night. They had drinks and laughter at a restaurant in the town square. Around 10 in the evening, she said goodbye and walked to her car. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Her car was found 2 days later by the river, about 5 kilometers outside of town. The doors were unlocked. Her purse was still inside. Her keys were in the ignition. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no evidence of foul play. It was as if she had simply stepped out of the car and vanished into thin air. The case consumed Karol. He worked 16-hour days. He interviewed everyone who knew her. He traced her movements that night, minute by minute. He followed every lead, no matter how unlikely. He developed theories and chased them down. He filled notebooks with observations and questions. But there was nothing. No witnesses, no physical evidence, no body. The case went cold after 6 months. His superiors told him to move on to other cases. But Karol could not let it go. He kept working it in his spare time. He kept the file at home. He kept thinking about it. It became an obsession. His wife Marie begged him to stop. It was destroying him, she said. It was destroying their family. Their daughter Clara was only 8 years old then and needed her father present, not lost in the maze of an unsolved case. Karol knew Marie was right, but he could not stop. He had made a promise to Anna's family, her mother and father, her younger sister. He had looked them in the eye and promised he would find out what happened. He would bring Anna home. He would get them justice. That promise haunted him. Every day the case remained unsolved was another day he had failed them. Another day their daughter, their sister, remained missing. Another day they lived in agonizing uncertainty. 2 years after Anna disappeared, Karol had what Marie called a breakdown. He preferred to think of it as a moment of clarity. He was sitting at his desk at the police station at 2 in the morning, going through the file for the 1,000th time, when he realized he could not do it anymore. He could not keep living in the past, could not keep chasing ghosts, could not keep breaking his promise to Anna's family over and over again. Every day he failed to solve the case. So he made a different choice. He resigned from the police force. He took the severance pay and bought the old workshop. He learned to fix cars instead of solving crimes. Marie was relieved. Clara was happy to have her father back. Life slowly returned to normal, or at least to a new version of normal. Karol threw himself into his new work with the same intensity he had once applied to investigations. He took courses in automotive repair. He studied constantly. He built a reputation for honest work and fair prices. The people of Březova trusted him. They brought him their cars, their tractors, their machinery. He fixed what was broken. He solved problems he could actually solve. But late at night, when he could not sleep, he would go up to the attic of their house, where he kept one box hidden behind the Christmas decorations. Inside that box was Anna's file. Every report, every interview, every photograph, every note he had ever made. He had promised himself he would not look at it. That part of his life was over. But knowing it was there, knowing he could look if he wanted to, somehow made it bearable. Marie knew about the box. She had never said anything about it. But he knew she knew. After 25 years of marriage, they could read each other without words. She understood that he needed to keep it, that throwing it away would be like admitting defeat, like betraying Anna one final time. So the box stayed in the attic, gathering dust, a monument to failure and unfinished business. Their marriage had survived, but it had been changed by those years. There was a distance between them now that had not been there before, a careful politeness. They loved each other. Karl had no doubt about that. But it was a quieter love than it had been. Marie had learned to accept that part of her husband would always be somewhere else, thinking about a case he could not solve, carrying guilt he could not shed. She had built her own life around that absence. She worked as a nurse at the regional hospital. She had friends. She had hobbies. She had learned to be happy without needing Karl to be fully present. Their daughter Clara was 28 now, living in Brno and working as an architect. She visited once a month, sometimes more often. She had inherited her father's intensity and her mother's practical nature. She understood both of them better than they understood themselves sometimes. She knew about Anna, about the case that had nearly destroyed their family. Karl had finally told her the whole story when she turned 18, thinking she deserved to know why her childhood had been the way it was, why her father had been absent even when he was physically present, why there had been tension in the house that she could feel but not understand. Clara had listened without judgment. She had asked questions. She had looked at him with eyes that were suddenly much older than 18, and said she understood. She said she was proud that her father cared so much about justice, about keeping his promises. But she also made him promise that he would not let it consume him any more, that he would live in the present, not the past. Karl had made that promise and had mostly kept it. Mostly. The workshop became his refuge. Here he was useful. Here he could help people. Here problems had solutions. A car would not start. Check the battery. Check the alternator. Check the fuel system. Logical. Sequential. Solvable. No grey areas. No unanswered questions. No ghosts. His regular customers became something like friends. Old man Novak, who brought in his ancient Skoda every 3 months for an oil change and spent an hour telling the same stories Karl had heard a dozen times. The Svoboda family, who had a farm outside town and brought in tractors with problems that would have stumped younger mechanics. Jana from the bakery, whose delivery van was older than she was and required constant attention to keep running. Karl listened to their problems and fixed their machines. He drank coffee with them and heard about their lives, their children and grandchildren, their aches and pains, their small triumphs and disappointments. It was simple human connection without the weight of tragedy. It was healing in its own way. The town of Brzezova itself was healing too, or at least changing. It had been in decline for years as young people moved to cities for work. But recently, there had been some new businesses opening, some young families moving in because the housing was affordable. The old cinema had reopened. There was talk of renovating the town square. Life continued. People adapted. Time moved forward, whether you were ready or not. Karl had learned to move forward with it. He took satisfaction in his work. He appreciated the quiet rhythms of small-town life. He tried to be present for Marie, to be the husband she deserved. He video-called Clara every Sunday. He went fishing with Tomasz, his old partner from the police force, once a month. They would sit by the river with their lines in the water and talk about nothing important, both of them carefully avoiding the subject of old cases, old failures, old ghosts. It was a good life. Not the life Karol had imagined for himself when he was young and full of ambition. Not the life he had wanted, but a good life nonetheless. A life built on acceptance and small pleasures and the wisdom that comes from learning you cannot fix everything. That some questions have no answers. That some promises cannot be kept, no matter how hard you try. And then on a Monday morning in October, 20 years after Anna Dvořáková disappeared, an old rusty car rolled into his workshop, and everything changed. It was a typical Monday morning, the kind where the weekend still lingered in your bones, and the week ahead felt long. Karol had arrived at the workshop at 7 as always, made his coffee, and opened the bay doors to let in the cool autumn air. The leaves were turning gold and red on the trees that lined the street, and there was that particular smell in the air that came with October, wood smoke and damp earth and the promise of winter. He had 3 appointments scheduled for the day: an oil change, a brake inspection, and a transmission problem that would probably take most of the afternoon. Nothing unusual. Nothing complicated. The car arrived around 9:30. Karol heard it before he saw it, the engine making a rattling sound that spoke of serious neglect. It pulled into the parking area in front of the workshop, trailing a small cloud of blue smoke. A Škoda Felicia from the mid-1980s, once white, but now more rust than paint. The kind of car that should have been scrapped 10 years ago, but somehow kept limping along through sheer stubbornness. Karol wiped his hands and walked out to meet the customer. The driver was a man in his late 40s, thin and nervous-looking. He wore an old jacket and kept glancing around as if expecting someone to appear. Karol did not recognize him, which was unusual in a town this size. The man got out of the car quickly, almost stumbling in his haste. His hands were shaking as he pulled out a set of keys. Karol noticed the man's fingernails were bitten down to the quick. "Good morning," Karol said calmly. "What seems to be the problem?" The man barely made eye contact. "Engine is making noise. Smoke coming out. Needs fixing." His voice was tight, rushed. He thrust the keys toward Karol, like they were burning his hand. "I will need to take a look," Karol said. "Could take a few days depending on what the issue is. I will need your contact information and—" "No," the man interrupted. "I mean, yes, fix it, whatever it costs. But I cannot stay. I will call you. I will call you tomorrow to check." He was already backing away toward the street. Karol frowned. "I need your name and phone number at least, for the paperwork." The man hesitated, then scribbled something on a scrap of paper from his pocket and handed it over. The handwriting was nearly illegible. Before Karol could ask anything else, the man turned and walked quickly down the street, his shoulders hunched, hands jammed in his pockets. Within seconds he had turned the corner and disappeared. Karol looked down at the Jehovah paper. The name said Petr Novotny, and there was a phone number. Something felt wrong about the whole interaction, but Karol had learned long ago that people were strange sometimes. Maybe the man was just having a bad day. Maybe he was embarrassed about the condition of his car. Maybe he had somewhere urgent to be. Karol walked around the Škoda, examining it. The rust was extensive, eating through the fenders and the door panels. The tires were bald. The windshield had a crack running across it. The interior, visible through the windows, was cluttered with old newspapers and empty bottles. This car had not been cared for in a very long time. He opened the driver's door, and the smell hit him immediately. Stale cigarettes and mildew, and something else underneath. Something organic and unpleasant. He made a mental note to air it out thoroughly before starting any work. He got in and turned the key. The engine caught after several tries, running rough and loud. Definitely a serious problem. Possibly a cracked cylinder head or worn piston rings. This was going to be an expensive repair, possibly more than the car was worth. He wondered if the nervous man would actually come back for it, or if this would become another abandoned vehicle he would have to deal with. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment in the silence, looking at the dashboard. That was when he noticed the registration sticker. It was old, faded, but still readable. The car had been registered in 1985 to someone named Svoboda. Josef Svoboda. The name triggered something in Karol's memory, a faint recognition he could not quite place. Josef Svoboda. He knew that name. But from where? He got out of the car and popped the hood, propping it open with the support rod. The engine bay was covered in oil and grime. He would need to clean it just to see what he was working with. He spent the next hour doing preliminary diagnostics, checking fluid levels, looking for obvious problems. The work was mechanical, requiring no thought, leaving his mind free to wander. Josef Svoboda. Josef Svoboda. Where did he know that name from? Around 11, he decided to move the car into the workshop bay. He got back in, started the reluctant engine, and drove it slowly onto the lift. As he shifted in the seat, his foot kicked something under the passenger seat. He reached down and felt paper, a bundle of something wedged deep under the seat frame. Probably just more trash, old receipts or fast food wrappers. He pulled it out. It was a yellowed piece of paper, folded several times, and then folded again. It had been there a long time. The creases were almost breaking through. He unfolded it carefully. The paper was from a notebook, the kind with lines. The edges were ragged where it had been torn out. The writing was in blue ink, faded but still legible. The handwriting was shaky, hurried, full of emotion. Karol read the words once, then read them again. His hands started to shake. The tutua paper trembled between his fingers. He sat down hard on his work stool, staring at the message. "Forgive me, Anna. It is in the forest by the old mill. I could not do anything else. Anna." The name hit him like a physical blow. For 20 years he had not heard that name spoken aloud, except in his own nightmares. For 20 years he had carried her memory like a stone in his chest. And now here was her name, written in a desperate hand, hidden in an old car. Karol felt the room tilt around him. His heart was pounding in his ears. This could not be real. This could not be happening. After 20 years, after he had finally learned to live with not knowing, after he had built a life around accepting failure. Here was a message. Here was a clue. Here was possibly the answer to the question that had consumed him. He read the note again, forcing himself to focus on each word. "Forgive me, Anna." Someone asking for forgiveness. Someone who had done something to Anna, or knew what had happened to her. "It is in the forest by the old mill." The body. They were talking about her body, where it was hidden. I could not do anything else. A confession, an explanation, an apology. The old mill. Karol knew exactly which mill this meant. There was only one old mill near Březova. It had been abandoned since the 1960s, a crumbling stone building deep in the forest north of town. He and his team had searched that area 20 years ago. They had searched everywhere within a 20-kilometer radius. But the forest was vast and dense. They could not search every meter of it. They had focused on areas near roads, near paths, places where someone could easily access. Karl stood up, legs unsteady. He walked to his office and sat down at the desk. The note was still in his hand. He spread it out carefully on the desk surface. The date? Was there a date? No. But the paper was old, probably from around the time Anna disappeared. The ink had faded in a way that suggested years, not months. This had been here a long time, hidden under a car seat, waiting. The car, the Škoda, registered to Josef Svoboda in 1985. Josef Svoboda. And suddenly Karl remembered. Josef Svoboda had been the mayor of Březova back then. He had held the position for almost 20 years, from the early 1980s until the early 2000s. He had been a prominent figure, well respected. He had retired and died maybe 5 years ago. Karl had been at his funeral. The whole town had turned out. Josef Svoboda, Mayor Svoboda. This had been his car. And hidden in his car was a note about Anna. Karl's mind was racing, trying to put pieces together. What was the connection? Mayor Svoboda had been interviewed during the investigation, of course. All prominent citizens had been. He had expressed shock and concern. He had offered the full cooperation of the town administration. He had personally donated money for the reward fund. There had been nothing suspicious about him. Nothing that raised any flags. But what if they had missed something? What if he had been involved somehow? Karl picked up his phone, then put it down. He should call the police. This was evidence. This needed to be turned over to the proper authorities. But something stopped him. If he called now, they would take the note. They would investigate. And Karl would be shut out. He would never know what they found. He would be just another civilian watching from the outside while others tried to solve the case that had defined his life. He knew he was being irrational, knew he should follow procedure. But after 20 years of wondering, after 20 years of guilt and failure, he could not give this up. Not yet. He needed to think, needed to understand what this meant. He would call the police. Of course he would. But first he needed to process this, needed to figure out his next step. He looked at the clock. Almost noon. Marie would be at work. Clara was in Brno. Tomáš, his old partner, would be at the police station. Karl thought about calling him, about sharing this discovery. Tomáš would know what to do. Tomáš would help him think clearly. But Tomáš would also insist on following procedure, on turning over the evidence immediately. And Karl was not ready for that. Not yet. He put the note carefully in his desk drawer and locked it. Then he went back to the workshop bay and stared at the old Škoda sitting on the lift. This car held secrets. Secrets that had been buried for 20 years. And somehow, impossibly, those secrets had found their way to him. That night, Karl could not sleep. He lay in bed next to Marie, listening to her steady breathing, staring at the ceiling. His mind would not stop turning over the discovery. The note, the words, Anna's name after 20 years of silence. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shaky handwriting. "Forgive me, Anna." At 2 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep. He got up quietly, careful not to wake Marie, and went downstairs. He made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the darkness, watching the night through the window. He knew what he needed to do. He needed to look at the file again, the file he had sworn to leave alone, the file that represented everything he had tried to move past. But this changed things. This was new evidence. This was a real lead, maybe the only real lead they had ever had. He finished his coffee, put on his jacket, and climbed the stairs to the attic. The house was old, and the attic stairs creaked under his weight. He pulled the string to turn on the bare bulb overhead. The space was filled with the accumulation of decades. Old furniture, boxes of clothes, Christmas decorations, forgotten belongings. He moved past it all to the back corner, where a single cardboard box sat behind a rolled-up rug. The box was unmarked, sealed with packing tape that had yellowed with age. Karol pulled it out and carried it downstairs to his small home office. He closed the door, turned on the desk lamp, and sat down. For a long moment, he just looked at the box. Opening it felt like opening a door to the past, letting all those old ghosts back in. But they had never really left, had they? They had always been there, waiting. He cut through the tape with scissors and opened the flaps. The smell hit him first. Old paper and dust, and that particular scent of archived documents. Inside was the complete file on Anna Dvořáková, everything he had compiled during 2 years of investigation. He lifted out the contents carefully, reverently. There were 3 thick folders full of reports, a large envelope containing photographs, several notebooks filled with his handwritten observations, a timeline he had created on poster board, maps marked with locations, interview transcripts, laboratory results, everything. He opened the first folder, and there was Anna's photograph, the one her family had provided for the missing person poster. She was smiling at the camera, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes bright with life. She had been so young, only 23, younger than his daughter was now. The thought made his chest tighten. He had promised to find her, had looked her parents in the eye and promised to bring their daughter home. They were both dead now. Her father had died 8 years ago from a heart attack. Her mother had followed 3 years later. They had died not knowing what happened to their child. The guilt of that never went away. Karol spent the next 3 hours going through everything. He read reports he had written 20 years ago in his own handwriting that now looked foreign to him. He studied photographs of the scene where Anna's car had been found. He reviewed the timeline of her last known day. She had taught classes at the elementary school. She had gone home to her apartment around 4 in the afternoon. She had called her sister around 6. They had talked about weekend plans. Around 7:30, she met 3 friends for dinner at a restaurant in the town square. They had eaten and talked and laughed. Several witnesses remembered seeing them. The friends said Anna had seemed perfectly normal, happy even. She had talked about her students and about a vacation she was planning. Around 10 in the evening, Anna had said goodbye to her friends. They had all offered to walk her to her car, but she had laughed and said she was fine. The parking area was well lit and only 2 blocks away. Several people had seen her walking alone down the main street. She had been wearing jeans and a red jacket. She had been carrying a small purse. Then nothing. No one saw her get into her car. No one saw her drive away. No one saw anything unusual. Her car was found 48 hours later when a fisherman noticed it parked by the river with the driver's door slightly open. Karol had interviewed everyone who knew Anna, her family, Her friends, her colleagues at school, her neighbors, her former boyfriends. Everyone agreed she was well liked. No enemies, no problems, no reason anyone would want to hurt her. There had been no evidence of financial trouble or personal crisis. No indication she might have wanted to disappear voluntarily. She had simply vanished. The investigation had considered every possibility. Stranger abduction, someone she knew. Accident, voluntary disappearance. But every lead had gone nowhere. Every theory had collapsed under scrutiny. The case had consumed Carol's team for months, and then it had been quietly shelved as the newest cold case. Now Carol read through his old notes with fresh eyes, looking for any mention of Josef Svoboda. He found the interview transcript from 20 years ago. Mayor Svoboda had been questioned as part of the routine interviews with prominent citizens. He had been cooperative and concerned. He had known Anna slightly, as he knew most people in town. He had seen her at community events. He thought she was a lovely young woman and a dedicated teacher. He had no information about her disappearance. The interview had lasted maybe 20 minutes. Nothing suspicious, nothing that warranted follow-up. Carol tried to remember the man from that interview, but could only recall a vague impression of a well-dressed older man with grey hair and a politician's smile. He pulled out the map and found the location where Anna's car had been discovered. Then he found another map that showed the forest area north of town. He located the old mill. It was maybe 8 kilometers from where the car had been found. Not particularly close, but not impossibly far either. The mill sat deep in the forest, accessible by an old logging road that was rarely used. Carol and his team had searched near the mill, but not extensively. It had not seemed relevant. There was nothing to connect Anna to that location. But now there was this note, this message that said her body was there, in the forest by the old mill. Carol made notes on a fresh pad of paper. Questions he needed answered. Who wrote the note? Was it Josef Svoboda himself? If so, what was his connection to Anna? Had he been involved in her disappearance? Or had he just known what happened and hidden the truth? And who was the nervous man who had brought the car to the workshop? Someone named Peter Novotny, if that was even his real name. How did he get the car? Did he know about the note? Was he trying to expose the truth, or was he just coincidentally bringing in an old car for repairs? As dawn began to lighten the sky outside his office window, Carol realized he had to make a decision. He could call the police right now. Turn over the note. Let them handle it. That would be the right thing to do. The legal thing. The responsible thing. But he already knew he was not going to do that. Not yet. He needed to verify the information first. Needed to see if there was really something at the old mill. If he called the police now, and they searched and found nothing, the note would be dismissed as a hoax or a dead end. But if he confirmed there was something there first, then when he brought in the authorities, it would be with solid evidence. That was how he rationalized it to himself anyway. He heard movement upstairs. Marie was awake. Carol quickly gathered all the documents and put them back in the box. He carried it to the office closet and shoved it behind some old coats. Then he went to the kitchen and started making breakfast, trying to act normal. Marie came down a few minutes later, already dressed in her nurse's uniform. She looked tired. She had been working long shifts at the hospital lately. "You are up early," she said, pouring herself coffee. "Could not sleep?" "Just thinking about a repair job," Carol said. The lie came easily. Too easily. Old car. Complicated problem. Marie looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. She knew him too well. "Karel," she said quietly. "Are you okay? You look troubled." "I am fine," he said, forcing a smile. "Just tired. You know how it is." She did not push further, but he could see the concern in her eyes. She kissed him on the cheek and left for work. Karel stood alone in the kitchen, feeling the weight of his deception. He was lying to his wife, hiding things from her. Again, just like he had 20 years ago, when the case had consumed him. He had promised himself he would never do that again. But here he was, already falling back into old patterns. He told himself it was just for a few days, just until he figured out what this note meant. Then he would tell her everything. She would understand. She had to understand. Later that morning, Karel called the number the nervous man had written down. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. No personal message, just the automated voice saying the number was not available. He tried twice more throughout the day with the same result. By evening, he was certain the number was fake. The man had given him a false name and false contact information, which meant he had known something, had known about the note, or at least suspected there was something wrong with the car. The whole thing felt more suspicious by the hour. Karel waited until Wednesday morning. He told Marie he was going to pick up parts from a supplier in the next town. Another lie. Another small betrayal that made him feel sick inside. But he could not stop now. He needed to know. He drove north out of Brzezova, taking the old highway that wound through farmland and eventually into the forested hills. The morning was cool and misty, the kind of weather that made everything seem unreal, dreamlike. He had not been out this way in years, not since the investigation 20 years ago, when they had searched these woods day after day, hoping to find some trace of Anna. The turnoff to the old logging road was almost invisible, overgrown with brush and young trees. Karel drove past it twice before spotting the gap in the vegetation. He saw, turned onto what was barely a path anymore, his truck bouncing over ruts and rocks. The forest closed in around him, tall pines and oaks that blocked out most of the sky. The logging road had not been maintained in decades. Branches scraped along both sides of the truck. After about 2 kilometers, the road ended in a small clearing. Karel parked and got out. The silence of the forest was profound. No traffic noise, no human sounds, just the whisper of wind in the trees and the distant call of a crow. Karel stood for a moment, getting his bearings. He pulled out the old map he had brought and oriented himself. The mill should be about half a kilometer to the northeast, following what remained of an old footpath. He locked the truck and started walking. The forest floor was thick with fallen leaves, and the undergrowth grabbed at his legs. He had dressed for this, wearing sturdy boots and old work pants, but he still felt unprepared. The forest felt wood in a way that made him uneasy. After 20 minutes of walking, he saw the mill. It emerged from the trees like a ghost from another era. The building had been constructed of stone some time in the late 1800s, built to last forever. 3 stories tall with narrow windows and a collapsed roof. The water wheel that had once powered it was long gone, leaving only iron brackets rusting in the stone wall. A small stream ran beside the building, the same stream that had once turned the wheel. Nature was slowly reclaiming everything. Vines covered the walls. Young trees grew from cracks in the foundation. Inside the mill would be nothing but fallen timbers and debris. Karel had been here before, of course. 20 years ago, his team had searched this building and the immediate area. They had found nothing. But they had not had any reason to dig. They had been looking for surface evidence, for signs of disturbance, for anything recent. If someone had buried something here back then, if they had done it carefully, his team would have missed it. The note said the forest by the old mill. Not in the mill. By it. Which could mean anywhere in the surrounding woods. Karl walked around the perimeter of the building, looking for anything that seemed significant. Any sign of old disturbance, any marker or indication. There was nothing obvious. The forest looked undisturbed, decades of leaf litter covering everything. How was he supposed to find anything out here? He had no equipment, no ground-penetrating radar. No cadaver dogs, just his eyes and his instinct, and a note that might be nothing more than a cruel hoax. He spent 2 hours walking in expanding circles around the mill, examining the ground, looking for anything unusual. Old depressions in the earth, areas where trees did not grow, disturbed soil. His knees ached from crouching, his back hurt from bending over, and he found nothing. By noon, Karl admitted defeat, at least for today. If there was something here, he was not going to find it on his own. He would need help, would need to bring in the authorities with their equipment and their expertise. He had tried to verify the information on his own, and failed. It was time to turn this over to people who could do it properly. He made his way back to the truck, feeling discouraged and old. The drive back to Brzezova felt longer than the drive out. He rehearsed in his mind how he would call Tomasz, what he would say, how he would explain why he had waited 3 days to report the note, how he would justify going to the mill alone instead of calling immediately. When he got back to the workshop, there was a car waiting in the parking area, not the old Skoda, but a silver sedan, and leaning against it was Tomasz himself. Karl's heart sank. His old partner looked the same as always, tall and broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair gone grey at the temples. He was wearing civilian clothes, but he still somehow looked like a cop. Maybe it was the way he stood, alert and assessing. Or maybe Karl just knew him too well. Tomasz watched Karl pull into the lot and park. He walked over as Karl got out of the truck. "Taking the day off?" Tomasz asked. His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "Thought you would be in the workshop." "Had to pick up some parts," Karl said. Another lie. He was drowning in lies now. "What brings you out here?" "Just happened to be in the area," Tomasz said. "Thought I would stop by. See how you are doing. We have not talked in a while." They went inside the workshop. Karl made coffee. They sat in the small office across from each other, old friends and former partners. Tomasz asked about Mari and Klara. Karl asked about Tomasz's wife and their son, who was in university. They talked about fishing, about the weather, about nothing important, but Karl could feel the tension. Tomasz had not just happened to stop by. He wanted something, or knew something. Finally, Tomasz leaned forward. "Karl," he said quietly, "I heard something interesting yesterday. Thought you should know. Someone called the station asking questions about the Anna Dvořáková case. Wanted to know if the file was still open, if anyone was still investigating. The desk sergeant who took the call mentioned it to me because he knew I had worked that case with you." Karl felt his stomach drop. Who was asking? Did not give a name. Called from a blocked number. Just asked the questions and hung up. Tomasz watched Karl carefully. It is a strange coincidence, do you not think? After 20 years of silence, suddenly someone is asking about Anna. And around the same time, I heard you had an unusual customer drop off an old car. Very nervous fellow. Gave a fake name and number. Left the car and practically ran away. "How did you hear about that?" Karl asked. "Small town," Tomasz said with a shrug. People talk. Old man Novak mentioned it to his grandson. Grandson mentioned it to his girlfriend. Girlfriend's mother works at the station. You know how it goes." He paused. "So I am here as your friend, not as a cop. If something is going on, if you have stumbled into something related to Anna, you need to tell me. You need to let me help you." Karol looked at his old partner. Tomasz had been there through all of it 20 years ago, had worked the case alongside him, had understood the obsession even when he did not share it, had covered for Karol when he worked too many hours, had helped him search long after the case was officially cold. If there was anyone Karol could trust with this, it was Tomasz. But bringing Tomasz in meant losing control, meant turning it over to official channels, meant becoming a bystander again. Karol was not ready for that. "There is nothing going on," Karol said. "Just an odd customer. Probably stolen car or something and the guy got nervous. It happens." Tomasz stared at him for a long moment. Then he sighed. "All right," he said, "if that is how you want to play it. But Karol, listen to me. If this is about Anna, if you have found something, you cannot do this alone. You left the force. You are a civilian now. You have no authority, no protection. If you go poking around in something dangerous, you could get hurt. Or worse, you could contaminate evidence and destroy any chance of prosecution." "I understand," Karol said. "Do you?" Tomasz stood up. "Because I remember how you were back then, how it consumed you, how it almost destroyed your marriage and your health. I do not want to see you go through that again." He put a hand on Karol's shoulder. "Promise me that if you find anything at all, you will call me immediately. Promise me you will not try to handle it yourself." Karol looked his friend in the eye. "I promise," he said. And even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was another lie. Tomasz seemed to know it too. He shook his head sadly and left. Karol watched him drive away, feeling the weight of betrayal. He was lying to everyone now, to Marie, to Tomasz, to himself. But he could not stop. The note had awakened something in him, some old hunger for answers, for closure, for redemption. He was going to see this through, whatever it took. That evening, Karol sat at dinner with Marie and tried to act normal. She talked about her day at the hospital. He pretended to listen while his mind turned over the problem. He needed help searching the area around the mill, but he could not ask the police without revealing everything. He needed equipment he did not have. He needed more information about Józef Swoboda and his connection to Anna. He needed to find the nervous man who had brought the car. Too many questions, not enough answers. After dinner, he retreated to his home office and pulled out the box again. This time he focused on the background information. The people connected to Anna, her family, her friends, her colleagues. He made a list of everyone who was still alive, still in the area. People he could talk to. People who might remember something useful. Over the next few days, Karol began reaching out to people from Anna's past. He was careful about it, framing his questions as casual reminiscences rather than active investigation. He started with people who had been less involved in the original case, people who might not realize he was digging for information. His first stop was the elementary school where Anna had taught. Most of the staff from 20 years ago had retired or moved on, but the principal, a woman named Helena Brozova, had been a young teacher back then. She remembered Anna fondly. They met for coffee at a small cafe in the town square. Helena was in her early 50s now, her hair cut short and graying at the roots. She smiled warmly when Karol arrived, but there was sadness in her eyes when he mentioned Anna's name. "I think about her sometimes," Helena said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "She was so full of life, so dedicated to her students. It was such a terrible shock when she disappeared." Carol asked gentle questions about Anna's life at the school. Had she seemed troubled about anything? Had there been any conflicts with colleagues or parents? Helena shook her head. Anna had been well liked by everyone. The children adored her. The parents respected her. There had been no problems that Helena could remember. "She was planning a field trip," Helena said, "to the museum in the city. She was so excited about it. She had been organizing it for weeks. That was the kind of teacher she was, always going above and beyond for the children." Then Carl shifted the conversation. He asked if Helena remembered anything about prominent citizens who had been involved with the school back then. Had Mayor Svoboda ever visited? Had Anna interacted with him? Helena thought for a moment. "The mayor came to school events sometimes," she said. "Ribbon cuttings, award ceremonies, that kind of thing. He liked to be seen supporting education. But I do not recall Anna having any particular connection to him." She paused, her brow furrowing. "Although, now that you mention it, there was something. A fundraiser. The school was raising money for new library books, and Mayor Svoboda helped organize an event. Anna was on the planning committee. They must have worked together on that." This was new information, something that had not come up in the original investigation. Carl pressed gently for more details. The fundraiser had been in the spring of 2005, just a few months before Anna disappeared. It had been held at the town hall, a dinner and auction. Quite successful, as Helena recalled. Anna had been enthusiastic about it. Carl made a mental note to find records of this event. He thanked Helena and moved on to his next contact. That afternoon, he tracked down Hanna Mala, who had been one of Anna's closest friends. Hanna still lived in Brzezova, working as a librarian at the public library. Carl found her there, shelving books in the history section. She was startled to see him. "Detective Novak," she said, then corrected herself. "I'm sorry. I know you are not a detective anymore. It is just how I remember you." "Carl is fine," he said. "I was hoping we could talk about Anna." Hanna's face tightened. "After all these years? Why now?" "I have been thinking about her lately," Carl said, which was not quite a lie. "The case was never solved. It has stayed with me. I thought maybe if I talked to people again, with fresh perspective, something might come to light." They went to a quiet corner of the library. Hanna was hesitant at first, but gradually opened up. She talked about her friendship with Anna, about the good times they had shared. Carl let her talk, waiting for the right moment. Then he asked about Anna's romantic life. Had she been seeing anyone? Hanna had told the police 20 years ago that Anna was single, not dating anyone seriously. But now Carl watched her face carefully. "Was there someone?" he asked gently. "Someone she maybe did not want people to know about?" Hanna looked down at her hands. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then quietly, almost in a whisper, she said, "I promised I would never tell." Carl leaned forward. "Hanna, Anna is gone. She has been gone for 20 years. Her parents are both dead now. Whatever promise you made, I think Anna would want you to tell the truth. She would want justice." Tears welled up in Hanna's eyes. "I have carried this guilt for so long," she said. "When she disappeared, I wondered if I should have said something. But I was afraid of causing trouble, afraid of what people would think." She wiped her eyes. "Anna was seeing someone, an older man. someone important in town. It had to be secret because he was married. Anna told me about it just a few weeks before she disappeared. She was conflicted about it. She said she loved him, but she knew it was wrong. She was thinking about ending it. Who was he? Karol asked, though he already suspected the answer. She never told me his name, Hannah said. She called him M in her diary. She was afraid to even write his full name. But she gave me hints, said he was powerful, said people respected him, said if anyone found out, it would ruin him. I always wondered if it was— She stopped, looking afraid. If it was who? Karol pressed. Mayor Svoboda, Hannah whispered. But I do not know for sure. Anna never confirmed it. It is just what I always suspected. Karol felt his pulse quicken. This was the connection he had been looking for. Did you tell anyone about this suspicion, back when Anna disappeared? Hannah shook her head. I was scared. Mayor Svoboda was powerful. His family was influential. I was just a young woman working in a shop. Who would have believed me? And I had no proof, just a suspicion based on hints. She looked at Karol with haunted eyes. Do you think he had something to do with what happened to her? I do not. No, Karol said honestly. But I am going to find out. After leaving the library, Karol sat in his truck and went through Anna's diary again, the one he had kept in his files. He read it with new eyes, looking for references to M. There were several entries. Saw M today. He promises he will leave her, but I do not believe it anymore. And later, M is getting possessive, says he cannot stand the thought of me with anyone else. It frightens me sometimes. And then just 2 weeks before she disappeared, I told M it has to end. He did not take it well. He said I was ruining his life. I think I made a terrible mistake. Karol felt cold. These entries painted a picture of a relationship that had turned toxic. A powerful man who could not accept rejection. But was Mayor Svoboda really M? Or was Karol seeing patterns because he wanted to see them? He needed more evidence, more confirmation. He went to the town hall and asked to see records from 2005. The clerk, a young woman who had not even been born when Anna disappeared, was happy to help. She brought him boxes of archived documents. Karol spent hours going through them, looking for anything related to the school fundraiser Helena had mentioned. He found it. A file on the library fundraising event held in April of 2005. There were planning documents, budget sheets, and photographs from the event. Karol studied the photographs carefully. There was Mayor Svoboda in a dark suit, smiling at the camera. And there, in the background of one photo, was Anna. She was talking to someone just outside the frame. Karol's hands shook as he looked at the next photograph in the sequence. It showed Anna and Mayor Svoboda standing together, his hand on her arm, both of them looking serious. Not the casual interaction of an official and a citizen. Something more intimate, more personal. Karol asked to make copies of the photographs. The clerk ran them through the scanner for him. As he waited, Karol thought about Josef Svoboda. The man had been in his 60s when Anna disappeared. Married to the same woman for 40 years. 3 grown children. Respected in the community. On the surface, an unlikely candidate for an affair with a woman 40 years younger. But Karol had been a detective long enough to know that people were capable of surprising things, that respectability was often a mask, that the most upstanding citizens sometimes had the darkest secrets. He drove home with the photographs on the seat beside him. His mind was racing with possibilities. If Svoboda and Anna had been having an affair, if she had tried to end it, if he had reacted badly, it was a motive for violence. It fit with the note. "Forgive me, Anna." A man consumed by guilt, confessing what he had done. But Karel needed more than suspicion and circumstantial evidence. He needed proof. He needed to find someone who had concrete knowledge of the relationship. He needed to trace the car's ownership. He needed to figure out who the nervous man was and how he got the vehicle. That evening, Marie confronted him. They were cleaning up after dinner, and she suddenly stopped, dish towel in hand, and looked at him. "Karel, what is going on?" she asked. "You have been distant for days, distracted. You are hiding something from me. I can feel it." Karel wanted to tell her, wanted to share the burden, but how could he explain without admitting he had been lying, without admitting he was investigating again, falling back into the obsession that had nearly destroyed them? "It is nothing," he said. "Just work stress." "Do not lie to me," Marie said, and there was steel in her voice. "We promised each other. No more secrets, no more obsessions, remember? After you left the force, we agreed we would have an honest life together. What happened to that?" Karel set down the plate he was holding. "I am sorry," he said. "You are right. I have been keeping something from you." He took a breath. "A customer brought in a car, an old car that belonged to Joseph Svoboda, and I found something in it. A note. About Anna." Marie's face went pale. "No," she said. "No, Karel. You cannot do this again." "I have to," he said. "This is the first real lead in 20 years. I cannot just ignore it." "Yes, you can," Marie said, her voice rising. "You can give it to the police and let them handle it. You are not a detective anymore. This is not your responsibility." "But it is," Karel said. "I made a promise to her family. I never fulfilled that promise. This is my chance to finally make it right." Marie stared at him, tears in her eyes. "And what about your promise to me? To our family? Does that mean nothing?" She threw down the dish towel. "I cannot watch you destroy yourself again. I will not." She walked out of the kitchen. A moment later, Karel heard the bedroom door close. He stood alone in the kitchen, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. Karel barely slept that night. He lay on the couch in the living room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around him. Marie had not come out of the bedroom. The distance between them felt like a chasm. He hated himself for putting her through this again. But he could not stop now. He was too close. In the morning, he heard her moving around upstairs, getting ready for work. She came down and made coffee without looking at him. The silence was worse than any argument. "Marie," he said, "please." She turned to face him. Her eyes were red from crying. "I love you," she said quietly, "but I cannot be part of this. If you choose to go down this path, you are choosing it alone. I will not watch you self-destruct. Not again." She picked up her bag and left for work. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed through the empty house. Karel sat in the silence for a long time. Then he made a decision. He called Clara. His daughter answered on the third ring, sounding cheerful. "Dad, hi, this is a nice surprise. You usually wait for Sunday to call." "Can you come home?" Karel asked. "I need to talk to you about something important." There was a pause. "What is wrong? Is Mom okay?" "She is fine. We are both fine. But I need your help. Can you come this weekend?" "Of course," Clara said, concern clear in her voice. "I will drive up a Saturday morning. Dad, you are worrying me. What is this about? I will explain when you get it here, Karl said. Thank you. He spent the next 2 days continuing his investigation while trying to maintain the appearance of normal life. He worked on cars in the shop. He ate meals alone. He avoided Tomasz's calls. And at night he went through the files again and again, piecing together a picture of Joseph Swoboda's life. The man had been mayor from 1982 until 2003. He had been a businessman before that, owning several properties in town. He had been married to his wife Irena for over 40 years. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. The son, Martin, still lived in the area. Actually, Martin Swoboda lived in Prague now, Karl discovered. He was a successful businessman, running a real estate development company. Karl found an online profile for Martin Swoboda Real Estate Development. There were photos of Martin, a well-dressed man in his late 40s, with graying hair and an expensive suit. He looked like his father, Karl thought, studying the pictures. Same strong jaw. Same confident expression. Karl made note of the company's address in Prague. He also found that Martin had been questioned during the original investigation, just like his father. He had been in his 20s then, working for his father's company. He claimed to barely know Anna, had seen her around town but never spoken to her beyond basic greetings. On Saturday morning, Clara arrived. She pulled into the driveway in her small car and got out, looking worried. Karl met her at the door and hugged her tight. She felt small in his arms, though she was a grown woman now. "Tell me what is going on," she said as they went inside. "Mum called me last night. She is really upset." Karel made them both coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. Then he told her everything. About the car, about the note, about what he had discovered regarding Mayor Svoboda and Anna, about the investigation he had been conducting secretly for the past week. Clara listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. When he finished, she sat back in her chair and looked at him for a long moment. "So you have been lying to Mum," she said finally, "and to Tomasz, and you went to the forest alone without telling anyone where you were going, and you have kept evidence hidden from the police." She ticked off each point on her fingers. "Dad, do you realize how dangerous and irresponsible this is?" "I know," Karl said. "But Clara, this is the first real lead we have ever had. I cannot just hand it over and walk away." "Why not?" Clara asked. "What are you trying to prove? That you can still be a detective? That you can fix a 20-year-old mistake?" "Dad, you are not responsible for what happened to Anna." "But I am," Karl said. "I promised her family. I failed them." Clara reached across the table and took his hand. "You did everything you could. Everyone said so. The case was impossible. There was no evidence. You could not manufacture clues that did not exist." She squeezed his hand. "But this is not really about Anna, is it? This is about you. About needing to prove something to yourself." Karl felt tears prick his eyes. "Maybe," he admitted. "Maybe you are right. But that does not change the fact that there is new evidence, real evidence, and I am the only one who can follow it right now." "Then do it properly," Clara said. "Call the police. Give them the note. Let them search the forest with proper equipment. Let them investigate Svoboda's connection to Anna. You are not alone in this. You do not have to carry it all yourself." "If I turn it over now, they will shut me out," Karl said. "I will never know what they find. I will never have closure." "Is that what this is about? Closure?" Clara shook her head. "Dad, there is no such thing. Even if you solve the case, even if you find out exactly what happened, it will not erase the past 20 years. It will not bring Anna back. It will not undo the pain her family suffered. You need to accept that some things cannot be fixed. They talked for hours. Clara was patient and gentle but firm. She understood his need, but she also saw clearly what he could not, that he was risking everything again for something that might never satisfy him, that he was choosing obsession over his family, over his marriage, over his own well-being. Finally, she asked the question that cut to the heart of everything. What would Anna want? If she could tell you what to do right now, what would she say? Carol thought about it. He tried to picture Anna, not as the victim in crime scene photos, but as the living woman people had described. Kind, caring, dedicated to helping others. She would tell me to stop, he said quietly. She would tell me to take care of my family, to let the professionals handle it. Then that is what you should do, Clara said. But even as he nodded, Carl knew he could not. He was too far in, too invested. He had to see it through. After Clara left, promising to talk to Marie and try to help smooth things over, Carl sat alone in his house and made a decision. He would go to Prague. He would find Martin Svoboda. He would confront him directly and ask about his father's relationship with Anna. It was risky, it might be foolish, but it was the only way forward he could see. On Monday morning, Carl closed the workshop and drove to Prague. The city was 3 hours away, and he spent the drive rehearsing what he would say. He had called Martin's office and learned that Martin would be there all day, meetings with clients. Carl did not make an appointment. He wanted the element of surprise. He arrived at the office building around 11. It was a modern glass tower in a business district. Martin's company occupied the 7th floor. Carl took the elevator up, feeling his heart pound. The reception area was sleek and expensive, chrome and leather furniture, abstract art on the walls. A young receptionist smiled at him from behind a curved desk. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" "No," Carl said, "but I need to speak with Mr. Svoboda. It is urgent. It concerns his father." The receptionist's smile faltered. "Let me check if he is available." She picked up the phone and spoke quietly. Then she looked at Carl. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "Tell him it is about Anna Dvořáková," Carl said. He saw the name register. The receptionist spoke into the phone again, her expression uncertain. After a moment, she hung up. "Mr. Svoboda will see you," she said, "but he only has a few minutes. Please follow me." She led Carl down a hallway lined with more abstract art. They stopped at a large office at the end. The receptionist knocked and opened the door. Inside was a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Behind a massive desk sat Martin Svoboda. He stood up as Carl entered. He was tall and well-built, dressed in an expensive suit. His face was carefully neutral. "Thank you, Eva," he said to the receptionist. She left, closing the door behind her. Martin gestured to a chair. "Please sit. You said this was about Anna Dvořáková. I have not heard that name in many years." Carl sat down. "I am Karel Novak. I was the detective who investigated her disappearance 20 years ago." "I remember," Martin said. "You questioned me, along with my whole family. We all told you we barely knew her. That has not changed. Has it not?" Carl pulled out the photographs from the fundraiser. He slid them across the desk. "These were taken at a school event a few months before Anna disappeared. That is your father. That is Anna. They seem quite familiar with each other." Martin glanced at the photos. His expression did not change. "My father was mayor. He knew everyone in town. Shaking hands and taking photos was part of his job. "What about the note?" Karl said. He pulled out a copy he had made. "This was found in your father's car, the car you had towed to my workshop last week." Now Martin's composure cracked. Color drained from his face. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up the paper and read it. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "From the Skoda," Karl said. "The one you had someone drop off at my shop. You knew this note was in there. You wanted it found. Why?" Martin set down the paper. He walked to the window and stared out at the city. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned back to Karl. His eyes were haunted. "Because I cannot live with it anymore," he said. "The guilt, the lies, 20 years of pretending, 20 years of knowing what my father did and saying nothing." Karl felt the room tilt around him. This was it. The confession he had been seeking for 20 years. "Tell me," he said quietly. "Tell me everything." Martin walked back to his desk but did not sit down. He paced instead, running his hands through his hair. "My father and Anna were having an affair," he said. "It started about 6 months before she disappeared. I do not know all the details of how it began. My father never talked about it openly. But I knew. I saw the way he looked at her. I saw them together once in his car, parked in a place they thought was secluded. They did not see me." "Did your mother know?" Karl asked. "I do not think so," Martin said. "My father was careful. He had a reputation to protect, a family, a career. But he was obsessed with Anna, absolutely consumed. It was like watching a man lose his mind." He stopped pacing and looked at Karl. "Do you understand what it is like to watch your father, a man you respected your whole life, transform into someone you do not recognize? Someone desperate and pathetic and dangerous." "Dangerous," Karl repeated. "He hurt her." Martin closed his eyes. "Anna wanted to end the relationship. She told my father it was wrong, that she could not continue living a lie. My father begged her to reconsider. He said he would leave my mother, that they could be together openly. But Anna refused. She said even if he left his wife, she did not want him anymore. She had realized the relationship was a mistake." Karl felt his hands clench into fists. "What happened the night she disappeared?" "My father called me," Martin said, his voice breaking. "It was late, maybe 11 at night. He sounded terrified. He told me to come to his office at the town hall. When I got there, he was in a complete panic. There was blood on his hands, on his shirt." Martin sat down heavily in his chair. "He told me there had been an accident, that Anna had come to see him. They had argued. She had threatened to go public about their affair, to destroy him. He said he lost control. He pushed her. She fell and hit her head. And she just stopped moving." The room was silent except for the hum of air conditioning. Karl could barely breathe. "Where did this happen?" "In his office. There was blood on the floor, on the desk. My father was hysterical. He kept saying it was an accident, that he did not mean to hurt her. But she was dead, and he needed help." Martin looked at Karl with hollow eyes. "I should have called the police right then, should have told the truth. But he was my father. My whole life he had been this strong, respected figure. And suddenly he was broken and desperate and begging me to help him. So I did." "You helped him cover it up," Karl said, trying to keep the anger out of his voice. "We cleaned the office." Martin said, "We put Anna's body in the trunk of my father's car, the Skoda. We drove out to the forest, to the old mill. We buried her there. It took us all night. We dug in the darkness, both of us crying. My father kept apologizing to her, kept saying he was sorry. He wrote that note sitting in the car afterward, his hands shaking so badly he could barely write. I think he meant to leave it at the grave, but he could not do it, so it stayed in the car. Carol felt sick. Her car was found by the river. My father drove it there the next morning, Martin said, wiped it clean, left it where it would be found, made it look like she had just vanished. He laughed bitterly, and it worked. No one suspected him. The respected mayor, the family man. Everyone thought she had been abducted by a stranger. The investigation looked everywhere except at the truth. You lived with this for 20 years, Carol said. You watched her family suffer, watched them die without knowing what happened to their daughter. How could you? I have asked myself that question every day, Martin said. At first I was terrified of going to prison, of destroying my family's name, of facing what I had done. So I stayed silent. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, years. And the longer I stayed silent, the harder it became to speak. The lie became my entire life. He wiped his eyes. My father died 5 years ago. Cancer. In his final weeks he was delirious, calling out for Anna, apologizing to her. My mother thought it was just the drugs, the confusion of dying. But I knew he was finally facing what he had done. Why now? Carol asked. Why bring me the car now? Because I have children, Martin said. 2 daughters. One of them is 23, the same age Anna was when she died. And I look at her, and I see Anna. I see the life that was stolen, the future that never happened. I cannot bear it anymore. He pulled open his desk drawer and took out a small cassette tape. After my father died, I found this in his safe, a recording he made a few days before he passed, his confession, everything he did. I think he wanted someone to know the truth, even if he could not say it while he was alive. Carol took the cassette, his hands shaking. Why did you not just take this to the police? Because I am guilty too, Martin said. I helped cover up a murder. I buried a body. I lied to investigators. If I go to the police, I go to prison. My children lose their father. My wife loses her husband. My business collapses. Everything I have built gets destroyed. He looked at Carol with desperate eyes. I am a coward. I admit it. I thought maybe if you found the evidence, if you solved the case, I could stay anonymous. The note would lead you to the body. The recording would prove what happened, and I could continue my life without facing the consequences. That is not how justice works, Carol said. I know, Martin said, but I am not strong enough to turn myself in. I have tried 100 times to walk into a police station and confess. I cannot do it. So I did this instead. I gave you the car with the note. I am giving you this recording. Please, find Anna. Bring her home. Let her family finally have peace, even if they are gone. That has to count for something. Carol stood up, the cassette tape gripped tight in his hand. He felt a storm of emotions. Rage at Martin for his cowardice. Rage at Joseph Svoboda for his crime. Sorrow for Anna and all the years stolen from her. Relief that he finally knew the truth. This is not over, he said. You are not going to walk away from this. I know, Martin said quietly. Do what you have to do. I will not run. I will not hide. If the police come for me, I will not resist. But I cannot be the one to turn myself in. I am too weak. Karl walked out of the office without another word. He made it to his truck before the shaking started. He sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process everything he had just heard. 20 years. 20 years of searching and wondering and torturing himself. And now he had the answer. Anna had been killed by Josef Svoboda in a moment of rage and panic. Buried in the forest where she had lain undiscovered all this time. And Martin had helped cover it up, and had lived with that guilt for 2 decades. Karl pulled out his phone. He should call Tomasz right now, should turn over the evidence, should let the proper authorities handle everything from here. But his hands would not move. Because if he called now, this moment would end. The moment where he alone knew the truth, where he had solved the case that had consumed his life. Once he made that call, it would become official. He would have to give statements, would have to explain why he had withheld evidence, would have to face consequences for his own actions over the past week. And Martin would be arrested, would face trial, would go to prison and destroy his family in the process. Did Martin deserve that? Yes, rationally, Karl knew he did. You cannot help cover up a murder and walk away unpunished. Justice demanded consequences. But a small part of Karl, the part that had carried guilt for 20 years, understood Martin's weakness, understood how fear and love could make someone do terrible things, understood how one bad choice could trap you in a web of lies that became impossible to escape. Karl sat in the parking garage for over an hour, holding his phone, unable to make the call. Finally, he started the truck and began the long drive back to Brzezova. He needed to think, needed to process, needed to decide what kind of man he was going to be. The kind who followed the rules no matter what, or the kind who sometimes bent them for what felt like a greater good. He did not have an answer yet. Halfway home, his phone rang. It was a number he did not recognize. He almost did not answer, but something made him pick up. Hello? Mr. Novak? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. This is Eva Markova. I am Mr. Svoboda's assistant. He asked me to call you. What does he want? Karl asked warily. He wanted you to know something, Eva said. After you left, he called his lawyer. He is turning himself in. He said to tell you that your visit gave him courage he did not have before. He is going to the police this afternoon to confess everything. Karl pulled over to the side of the highway, his heart pounding. He is really doing it. Yes, Eva said. He said you were right, that this is not how justice works, that his daughters deserve a father who faces his mistakes instead of running from them. He wanted to thank you. Karl ended the call and sat in the truck, staring out at the passing cars. Martin was going to confess, was going to face the consequences. It changed everything. Karl no longer had to make the impossible choice. He could call Tomasz now with a clear conscience. Could turn over the evidence knowing that Martin had chosen to do the right thing. He picked up the phone and dialed. Tomasz answered on the second ring. Karl, I was starting to worry. You have been avoiding my calls. I need you to listen, Karl said. And I need you not to interrupt. I found something. Evidence in the Anna Dvořáková case. Real evidence. And I need to turn it over to you right now. There was a brief pause. Then Tomasz said, I am listening. Karl told him everything. About the note, about tracking down Martin, about the confession he had just heard, about the recording and the location of the body. Tomáš was silent through all of it. When Karel finished, his old partner let out a long breath. "You should have called me a week ago," Tomáš said. "You know that, right? You contaminated evidence, conducted an unauthorized investigation, confronted a suspect alone without backup." "I know," Karel said. "I am sorry." "But you solved it," Tomáš said, and there was something in his voice. Pride, maybe, or vindication. "After 20 years, you actually solved it. Anna's family deserves to know the truth. Even if they are gone, the truth matters." "What happens now?" Karel asked. "Now you drive straight to the station," Tomáš said. "You give me everything you have. The note, the recording, your documentation, and I call in the forensic team. We go to that forest and we find Anna. We bring her home. And Martin Svoboda. Justice for what he did." He paused. "You did good work, Karel. You never stopped fighting for her. That counts for something." Karel drove straight to the police station. It was late afternoon when he arrived, the sun already sinking toward the horizon. The building was a squat concrete structure on the edge of town, unchanged since he had worked there 2 decades ago. He parked and sat for a moment, gathering himself. This was it. The moment everything became real. The moment his private investigation became an official case again. The moment Anna's story would finally reach its conclusion. Tomáš was waiting for him in the lobby. His old partner looked older in the harsh fluorescent light, the lines around his eyes deeper than Karel remembered. But his handshake was firm, and his eyes were steady. "Come on," Tomáš said. "I have a conference room set up. We need to document everything properly." They spent 3 hours going through it all. Karel laid out the note, carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve he had bought at a stationery store. He handed over the cassette tape in its worn case. He produced the photographs from the fundraiser and his documentation of conversations with Hanna and Helena. He walked Tomáš through his timeline, explaining each step of his investigation. Tomáš took notes, asked questions, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief or frustration, but never interrupting the flow. 2 other detectives joined them, younger men Karel did not know. They listened intently, recording everything. "Martin Svoboda is already here," Tomáš said when Karel finished. "He arrived an hour ago with his lawyer, walked in on his own and asked to make a statement. He is in an interview room right now giving his full confession." "Is he under arrest?" Karel asked. "Not yet," Tomáš said. "His lawyer negotiated that he could give his statement voluntarily first. But yes, he will be charged. Accessory to murder, obstruction of justice, concealing a death. He is looking at serious prison time." Tomáš leaned back in his chair. "The district attorney is already involved. This is going to be a major case. The mayor's son confessing to covering up a murder his father committed. The media will be all over it." Karel felt suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried him through the day was draining away, leaving only bone-deep fatigue. "What about Anna?" he asked. "When do we search for her?" "Tomorrow morning," Tomáš said. "I have already called in the forensic team. Cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, the works. We will have maybe 20 people out there. If she is where Martin says she is, we will find her." One of the younger detectives spoke up. "Sir, we should have Mr. Novak there. He knows the area from the original investigation. His knowledge could be valuable." Tomáš looked at Karel. "What do you think? Are you up for it?" Karel nodded. "I need to be there. I need to see this through." All right, Tomasz said. We meet at the logging road access point at 7 in the morning. Dress for rough terrain. It is going to be a long day. Karol left the station as the sun was setting. He drove home through the darkening streets of Brzezowa, past familiar houses and shops, past the elementary school where Anna had taught, past the town square where she had last been seen alive. The town looked the same as always, but everything felt different now. A secret that had poisoned this place for 20 years was finally coming to light. He wondered how people would react when the news broke. Would they believe it? Would they be shocked that their respected former mayor had been a murderer? Or would they be angry that the truth had been hidden for so long? At home, Marie's car was in the driveway. Karol felt his stomach tighten. He had not spoken to her since their argument, had not explained where he had been or what he had been doing. He walked in to find her sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. She looked up when he entered. Her eyes were red, but her expression was calm. "Clara called me," Marie said. "She told me everything, about what you found, about what you have been investigating." Karol set his keys on the counter. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have told you from the beginning. I should not have lied." Marie nodded slowly. "No, you should not have. But I understand why you did. I understand this case never really left you, that you needed to see it through." She stood up and walked over to him. "Clara also said you solved it, that you finally found out what happened to Anna." "Yes," Karol said. "It was Mayor Svoboda. He killed her and his son helped cover it up. We are searching for her body tomorrow." Marie put her hand on his cheek. "Then you kept your promise. After all these years, you kept your promise to her family." Karol felt tears spill down his face. "But they are gone. Her parents are both dead. They will never know the truth." "They know," Marie said softly. "Wherever they are, they know. And they are grateful." She pulled him into an embrace. "I am sorry I was so angry. I was scared of losing you again to this obsession. But I see now that you needed to do this, that you could not have let it go, even if you wanted to." They held each other in the kitchen as darkness fell outside. Karol told her everything that had happened, about confronting Martin, about the confession, about the cassette tape and the location of the grave. Marie listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions, mostly just being present. When he finished, she made him dinner, simple food that he barely tasted, but was grateful for. They ate together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from decades of shared life. That night, Karol lay in bed next to his wife and actually slept. Deep, dreamless sleep, the first real rest he had gotten in over a week. When his alarm went off at 5:30 in the morning, he woke feeling clear-headed and focused. Today they would find Anna. Today the case would finally be closed. He dressed in old jeans and boots and a heavy jacket. The October mornings were cold now, frost on the grass. Marie made him coffee and packed him a lunch like she used to do when he was on the force. "Be careful," she said, kissing him at the door. "Come home to me." "I will," he promised. Karol arrived at the meeting point just before 7. The old logging road access was crowded with vehicles. Police trucks, an evidence van, several personal cars, belonging to detectives and technicians. Tomasz was there coordinating, a clipboard in hand, directing people. The forensic team was unloading equipment. 2 German shepherds sat alertly next to their handlers, the cadaver dogs that would help in the search. Karol saw maybe 25 people total, all moving with purpose and efficiency. Tomasz spotted Karol and waved him over. "Good. You are here. I want you with me and Detective Horak." He gestured to one of the younger detectives from yesterday, a thin man with glasses. "You know the area. You can help us navigate and provide historical context." The team assembled for a briefing. Tomasz laid out the plan. They would proceed as a group to the mill, establish a base of operations there, then begin systematic searching of the area based on Martin Svoboda's description. The cadaver dogs would be deployed first. If they got a hit, the forensic team would move in with ground-penetrating radar to confirm before any digging began. Everything needed to be documented meticulously. This was a crime scene 2 decades old, but it still needed to be treated with all the protocols of a fresh investigation. They set out into the forest at 7:30. The morning mist hung between the trees, giving everything a ghostly quality. The group moved in silence, saving their energy for the work ahead. Karol found himself walking beside the forensic team leader, a woman named Dr. Suchkova, who had a reputation for thoroughness. "I read the original case file last night," she said to Karol. "You did extensive work back then, very detailed documentation. That is going to help us tremendously today." "Thank you," Karol said. "I just wish we had known where to look then." "You could not have known," Dr. Suchkova said. "Without witness statements or physical evidence pointing to this location, there was no reason to focus here. You did everything right with the information you had." They reached the mill around 8:30. The old stone building loomed out of the mist, looking even more decrepit than Karol remembered. The forensic team immediately began setting up their equipment. Tarps for sorting evidence, markers for mapping, cameras for documentation. The cadaver dog handlers consulted with Tomasz over a topographical map, discussing search patterns. Karol stood to the side, feeling suddenly like an outsider. These were professionals doing their jobs. His role here was limited. But then Tomasz called him over. "Karol, you were here during the original investigation. Was there any area you remember as being particularly difficult to search? Anywhere that might have been overlooked?" Karol studied the map, thinking back 20 years. "The north side of the mill," he said, pointing. "There is a steep slope there that goes down to the stream, very overgrown with thorn bushes. We did a visual inspection, but we did not physically search it thoroughly. It seemed unlikely anyone would bury something there, because of the difficulty accessing it." "But if someone wanted to hide something where it would not be found," Tomasz said, "that would be exactly the kind of place they would choose." They decided to start the search on the north side. The cadaver dog handlers took their animals and began working the area methodically. Karol watched the dogs move back and forth, noses to the ground, tails wagging slightly as they worked. These animals were trained to detect the specific scent of human decomposition, even decades old. If Anna was here, they would find her. 20 minutes into the search, one of the dogs stopped. It sat down abruptly and barked once. The handler immediately signaled to the team. "We have an alert," he called out. Everyone converged on the location. It was about 30 meters north of the mill, partway down the slope toward the stream, in a thick tangle of brush and young trees. The second dog was brought over, and it alerted in the same spot. 2 independent confirmations. Dr. Suchkova and her team moved in with the ground-penetrating radar. The equipment looked like a lawn mower with a computer screen attached. They pushed it slowly over the area where the dogs had alerted. Karol watched the screen, not really understanding what he was seeing, but noting the way the technicians nodded to each other. "Definite anomaly," one of them said, "approximately 1.5 meters down, size and shape consistent with human remains." Tomasz put his hand on Karol's shoulder. "This is it," he said quietly. "We found her." The excavation began. It was slow, painstaking work. Every shovelful of dirt had to be examined, every layer documented with photographs. The forensic team worked with small tools, brushes and trowels, removing earth carefully. Karl sat on a fallen log and watched, his emotions a confused tangle. Relief that Anna would finally be found. Sorrow at what had been done to her. Anger at the men who had put her here and left her for 20 years. And underneath it all, a deep, bone-tired satisfaction. He had kept his promise. After 2 decades, against all odds, he had found the truth. As the sun climbed higher in the sky and burned away the morning mist, the forensic team continued their careful excavation. Dr. Suchkova approached Karl during a break. "We have definitely found human remains," she said gently. "The preliminary examination suggests they have been here for a considerable time, consistent with your timeline. We will need dental records and DNA for positive identification, but based on location and circumstances, I am confident this is Anna Dvořáková." Karl nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Tomáš sat down next to him. "You did it, my friend," he said. "After all these years. You never gave up on her." "I just wish her parents could know," Karl said. "They know," Tomáš said, echoing Marie's words from the night before. "Somehow, wherever they are, they know." By early afternoon, the excavation had progressed enough that the outline of a burial site was clearly visible. The forensic team had uncovered what appeared to be remnants of an old tarp, deteriorated but still partially intact. Beneath it, they were carefully exposing skeletal remains. Dr. Suchkova worked with intense focus, using brushes to gently clear away dirt, photographing everything from multiple angles. The scene had an almost archaeological quality to it, this careful uncovering of something long buried. Karl watched from a distance, giving the professionals room to work. Other officers had arrived throughout the morning, including the district attorney and the chief of police. The case had become official now, no longer Karl's private investigation, but a major criminal matter that would dominate the news cycle for weeks. A tent had been erected over the excavation site to protect it from the elements and provide privacy. Media vans were already gathering at the forest access road, reporters trying to get close enough to see what was happening. Around 2 in the afternoon, Dr. Suchkova called everyone over for an update. She looked tired but satisfied. "We have successfully recovered the remains," she said. "Female, approximate age, early to mid-20s, based on bone haim development. The level of decomposition is consistent with burial occurring approximately 20 years ago. We found several items with the remains that will help with identification." She held up evidence bags. Fragments of clothing, including what appears to be denim, and a red synthetic material, possibly a jacket. Also jewelry, a silver necklace with a pendant in the shape of the letter A. Karl felt his breath catch. He remembered that necklace. Anna had been wearing it in several of the photographs from the investigation. Her sister had mentioned it specifically when listing what Anna had on her the night she disappeared. It was a gift from their mother, the sister had said, crying. Anna never took it off. Based on the physical evidence, the location, and the circumstances, Dr. Suchkova continued, I am confident these are the remains of Anna Dvořáková. We will confirm through dental records and DNA analysis, but I do not anticipate any surprises. She paused. There is one more thing. The condition of the skull shows evidence of blunt force trauma, consistent with what Martin Svoboda described in his confession. This appears to have been the cause of death. The chief of police thanked Dr. Suchkova and her team. Then he turned to address everyone assembled. This is a significant moment, he said. 20 years ago, a young woman disappeared from our town. Her case remained unsolved despite the best efforts of our department. Today we have brought her home. We have answers for her family, even though they are no longer here to receive them. This is due to the persistence of one man who never stopped believing we could find the truth. He looked at Karol. Former Detective Karol Nowak, your dedication to this case is an example to all of us. You have honored Anna's memory and the oath you took as an officer. The assembled officers applauded. Karol felt embarrassed and emotional. He nodded his thanks but could not find words. Tomasz walked over and embraced him. "You did it," his old partner said. "You actually did it." The remains were carefully transported to the forensic laboratory. The site was secured and marked for further investigation in case any additional evidence remained. The team began the process of packing up equipment and documenting everything. Karol helped where he could, grateful for something to do with his hands. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, casting long shadows through the forest, he found himself standing alone at the edge of the excavation site. The hole in the ground looked so small, such a small space to contain all the grief and mystery and loss of the past 20 years. He thought about Anna as she had been in life, young and optimistic and full of potential. He thought about the choices that had led her to that fatal encounter with Joseph Svoboda, a relationship that should never have happened, a man who could not accept rejection, a moment of violence that ended everything. And he thought about the aftermath, 2 decades of lies, of a family destroyed by not knowing, of Martin Svoboda living with guilt, of Karol himself consumed by a case he could not solve, nearly losing everything that mattered. "Are you all right?" It was Detective Horak, the young officer who had been assigned to work with Karol. "It must be overwhelming, after all this time." "I keep thinking about her family," Karol said. "Her mother used to call me every few months, for years, asking if there was any news, any progress. I had to tell her no every time. I had to watch her hope die a little more with each conversation. She never gave up believing I would find Anna, but she died without ever knowing the truth. But now her daughter can be properly laid to rest," Horak said. "That matters. Closure matters, even if it comes late." Karol nodded. The younger detective was right, of course. This was better than eternal uncertainty. Better than Anna remaining missing forever, her fate unknown. At least now there would be a funeral, a grave, a place for people to mourn, and there would be justice. Martin Svoboda would face trial for his role in covering up the crime. The truth would be public. Anna's story would finally be told completely. As the team prepared to leave the forest, Tomasz pulled Karol aside. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Martin Svoboda's confession has been fully documented. He provided details that only someone involved would know. Locations, times, specific actions. His lawyer is negotiating a plea deal. In exchange for his full cooperation and testimony, he will plead guilty to accessory after the fact and obstruction of justice. He is looking more at 8 to 12 years. What about his family?" Karol asked. "His wife and daughters?" "They are devastated," Tomasz said. "But his wife is standing by him. She released a statement saying that while she cannot condone what he did, she understands the impossible position he was in. She believes he is finally doing the right thing by telling the truth." They walked back through the forest together, the last ones to leave the site. Behind them, a single officer remained to guard the scene overnight. The path back to the vehicles seemed shorter than it had that morning. Or maybe Karol was just too tired to notice. His body ached from the long day. His mind felt numb from processing everything. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. Peace, perhaps, or at least the beginning of peace. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The story broke in the media the following morning and dominated every news cycle. Former mayor's secret affair and murder. Son's confession after 20 years of silence. The dramatic discovery of remains in the forest. Karol's role in solving the cold case. Reporters camped outside his workshop and his home. His phone rang constantly with interview requests that he declined. He had no interest in becoming a public figure. This was not about him. This was about Anna. The forensic analysis moved quickly. Dental records confirmed the remains were indeed Anna Dvořáková. DNA extracted from bone samples matched DNA from items her family had preserved. The cause of death was officially determined to be blunt force trauma to the skull consistent with a fall or blow. Everything Martin had confessed checked out. The district attorney announced that formal charges would be filed. Martin would be arraigned within the week. The case was solid, built on confession, physical evidence, and forensic proof. Karol spent a day at the police station giving additional statements, filling in details, helping prosecutors understand the timeline. They praised his investigative work, even as they gently reprimanded him for not coming forward immediately when he found the note. He accepted both the praise and the criticism with equal grace. He had done what he felt he had to do. The results spoke for themselves. On Thursday afternoon, 4 days after finding Anna, Karol received a phone call from a woman who introduced herself as Eva Dvořáková, Anna's younger sister. Karol's heart clenched. He had not spoken to Eva in over 15 years. The last time had been at her mother's funeral. "I heard the news," Eva said, her voice thick with emotion. "I wanted to call and thank you. You never forgot her. You never stopped looking." "I am so sorry it took so long," Karol said. "I am sorry your parents did not live to know the truth." "But you found it," Eva said. "After everyone else gave up, after the case was closed, you kept searching. You brought my sister home. You gave us answers." She paused, and Karol could hear her crying softly. "There will be a funeral, a proper funeral, next Wednesday. I hope you will come. I know Anna would want you there." "I will be there," Karol promised. "Thank you for calling." That evening, Marie cooked a special dinner. Clara drove up from Brno to join them. They sat together at the kitchen table, the three of them, and for the first time in weeks, the house felt peaceful. "I am proud of you, Dad," Clara said. "I know this was not easy. I know it cost you something. But you did the right thing. You honored your promise." "I just wish it had not taken 20 years, Karol said. "Sometimes that is how long justice takes," Marie said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "But it came. That is what matters." They talked about other things, about Clara's work, about a project she was designing, about Marie's patients at the hospital. Normal family conversation. Normal life. Karol realized how much he had missed this, how much he had been living in the past, in the shadow of unsolved tragedy. Maybe now he could finally let it go. Maybe now he could be fully present for the people who loved him. On Saturday, Karol returned to work for the first time since the discovery. The workshop felt strange, both familiar and foreign. Cars waiting for repair, tools in their places, everything as he had left it. But he was different now. Something had shifted inside him. The weight he had carried for 20 years was gone. Not completely. He would always carry some measure of regret for the years lost, but the crushing burden of failure had lifted. His first customer of the day was old man Novak, bringing in his ancient Skoda for another oil change. Novak had seen the news, of course. Everyone in town had. "You are a hero," the old man said, shaking Karol's hand vigorously. "Solving that case after all this time. The whole town is talking about it." "I'm not a hero," Karol said. "I just did what needed to be done." "That is what heroes always say," Novak replied with a grin. Throughout the day, other customers came by. Some with oars needing work, others just to offer congratulations and support. The people of Brzezova were proud of him, proud that one of their own had brought closure to a tragedy that had haunted the town for 2 decades. Karol accepted their kind words with humility and gratitude. He had not done this for recognition, but it felt good to know that people understood what it meant. That evening, Tomasz stopped by the workshop as Karol was closing up. "I have news," his old partner said. "Martin Svoboda's plea deal was finalized. He will plead guilty to accessory to murder after the fact, obstruction of justice, and concealing a death. Sentencing is set for next month. The prosecutor is recommending 10 years with possibility of parole after 7. "How is he handling it?" Karol asked. "As well as can be expected," Tomasz said. "His lawyer says he seems almost relieved, like he has been waiting for this for 20 years. The weight of the secret was destroying him." Tomasz leaned against the workbench. "I have been thinking about what you said, about how long guilt can poison a person. Martin lost 20 years of his life to that guilt, even before he was arrested. In some ways, he has already served a sentence." "But Anna lost her whole life," Karol said quietly. "She does not get those years back. That is the difference between guilt and justice. Guilt is what you feel. Justice is what you owe." Tomasz nodded. "You are right, as always." He smiled. "Listen, I wanted to tell you something else. The chief is recommending you for a civilian commendation, for exceptional service in solving a major case. There will be a ceremony next month." Karol shook his head. "I do not need a ceremony. I do not need recognition." "I know you do not," Tomasz said, "but sometimes it is not about what you need. It is about what others need. The town needs to honor what you did, to acknowledge that justice was served. Let them do that." Karol thought about it and finally nodded. "All right. For Anna, not for me." "For Anna," Tomasz agreed. The funeral was held on a grey Wednesday morning in late October. The sky was heavy with clouds that threatened rain, but never quite delivered. Karol arrived early at the small church on the edge of Brzezova, the same church where Anna's parents had been laid to rest years before. He wore his only suit, dark and somber, the tie feeling tight around his neck. Marie walked beside him, her hand in his, providing silent support. Inside the church was surprisingly full. People from the community who remembered Anna, former colleagues from the school, old friends, and many who had never known her but came anyway, drawn by the story, wanting to bear witness to this final chapter. Eva Dvořáková stood at the front, greeting people as they entered. She was in her early 40s now, though grief made her look older. When she saw Karol, she walked directly to him and embraced him without words. They stood that way for a long moment, two people connected by loss and finally by resolution. The service was simple and dignified. A priest spoke about Anna's life, about her dedication to teaching, about the light she had brought to the world in her brief time here. Eva read a poem their mother had loved. Several of Anna's former students, now adults themselves, shared memories of a teacher who had made a difference in their lives. Karl listened and felt the tears run down his face unchecked. This was what had been stolen. Not just a life, but all the connections that life had touched, all the potential that would never be realized, all the years that should have been. After the service, they gathered at the cemetery. Anna's grave was next to her parents', the three of them finally reunited. The casket was lowered gently into the earth as the priest said final prayers. Eva placed a single red rose on the casket before it disappeared from view. Then others came forward, placing flowers, saying silent goodbyes. When it was Karl's turn, he stood at the edge of the grave and spoke softly, words only Anna could hear. I kept my promise. You are home now. Rest in peace. The gathering afterward was held at a community hall. People shared food and stories, and slowly the somber mood lifted into something closer to celebration. Celebration of a life, however brief. Celebration of truth finally revealed. Celebration of justice, however delayed. Karl found himself talking to people he had not seen in years, former colleagues from the police force, witnesses he had interviewed 2 decades ago. They all wanted to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell him how much it meant that he had never given up. Eva pulled him aside at one point. I want you to have something, she said. She handed him a small photograph in a simple frame. It showed Anna smiling at the camera, young and full of life. This was her favorite picture of herself. My mother kept it on her bedside table until the day she died. I think Anna would want you to have it. To remember that she was more than just a case. She was a person. She mattered. Karl took the photograph with trembling hands. Thank you, he managed to say. I will treasure this. You gave her back to us, Eva said. You gave us the chance to say goodbye, properly. That is a gift beyond measure. She hugged him again, and then moved away to greet other guests. Marie appeared at Karl's side. Are you all right? She asked gently. Yes, he said, and realized it was true. I am all right. For the first time in 20 years, I am all right. They stayed until the gathering wound down, until the food was gone and people began to leave. Tomasz found Karl before he left. The commendation ceremony is scheduled for 2 weeks from now, his old partner said. The chief wants to make it a big thing. Media coverage, the whole department in attendance. Are you sure you are up for it? I will manage, Karl said. Like you said, it is not for me. It is for everyone else. The ceremony, when it came, was both embarrassing and gratifying. Karl stood on a stage in the town hall, wearing his suit while the chief of police read a citation praising his dedication and investigative skill. They presented him with a plaque and a medal. The assembled crowd, mostly police officers, but also civilians including Marie and Clara, applauded. Cameras flashed. Karl gave a brief speech, thanking his family for their support, thanking Tomasz for his friendship, and dedicating everything to Anna's memory. Afterward, there was a reception with more handshaking and congratulations. But the moment Karl valued most came a week later. He was working in his shop on a Tuesday afternoon, rebuilding a carburetor, when a young woman came in. She was maybe 25, wearing jeans and a university sweatshirt. Mr. Novak, she said hesitantly. I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Petra. I was one of Anna's students. I was only 8 when she disappeared, but I remember her. She was my favorite teacher. Karl set down his tools and wiped his hands. It is no bother. What can I do for you? I just wanted to thank you, Petra said, for not forgetting her, for caring enough to keep looking. When I heard the news that you had solved the case, I cried. Not just because we finally knew what happened, but because it showed that one person's determination can make a difference. That truth matters. That justice matters. She paused, seeming to gather her courage. I am in my last year of university. Criminal justice major. I want to be a detective. Anna inspired me to care about education. You inspired me to care about justice. So thank you. Carroll felt his throat tighten. That means more to me than any medal, he said. If you ever need advice or help, please come find me. I would be honored to help you. After Petra left, Carroll stood in his workshop, feeling a sense of completeness he had not known was possible. The case that had defined so much of his life was closed. The ghost that had haunted him was laid to rest. And somehow, through all the pain and struggle and years of searching, something good had emerged, something that would carry forward into the future. That evening, he sat with Marie on their back porch, watching the sun set over the town. The autumn air was crisp and clean. Leaves rustled in the breeze. From somewhere down the street came the sound of children playing. Normal life. Beautiful, ordinary life. Do you have any regrets? Marie asked him. About any of it? Carroll thought carefully before answering. I regret that it took so long, that Anna's parents died without knowing, that Martin lost 20 years to guilt and will now lose more to prison. But I do not regret pursuing the truth. Some things are worth fighting for, no matter how long it takes. Even if it costs you something? Marie asked. Even then, Carroll said. He took her hand. But I am done fighting now. The case is closed. Anna is at peace. Martin will face justice. It is time for me to focus on what matters most. My family. My life. The present instead of the past. Marie leaned her head on his shoulder. I am glad to have you back, she said softly. I am glad to be back, Carroll replied. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep blue. Carroll sat with his wife in comfortable silence and felt gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for her patience, for Clara's support, for Tomáš's friendship, for the chance to keep his promise, for the possibility of new beginnings even after terrible endings. The old Škoda still sat in his workshop, evidence now, waiting to be processed and eventually destroyed. But the note it had carried, the secret it had held, had led to truth, had led to closure, had led to this moment of peace. Carroll thought about Anna one last time, not as the victim in crime, seen photos, but as the vibrant young woman in the photograph Eva had given him, smiling, full of hope, forever young. He hoped that wherever she was, she knew that she had not been forgotten, that people had cared, that justice had finally come. And he hoped she had found peace, the same peace he was finally beginning to feel himself. Tomorrow he would return to his simple life, to fixing cars and drinking coffee with customers and being present for the people he loved. The past would always be part of him, but it would no longer define him. He had kept his promise. He had brought Anna home. And now, at last, he could let her rest.